I think they can't get it to spread or kill people. It's not quite deadly enough for their sake. So they're now taking to calling ordinary flu cases swine flu cases. Apparently they're misdiagnosed as much as 9 times out of 10.
Well, in the UK, if you call the swine flu helpline, you'll get somebody who isn't trained, who's reading from a screen, who's asked you a number of questions, and could very easily say you've got swine flu when you haven't. I mean, you must know about this, Amanda. What's the situation on this?
Yeah, it's just manned by people who say, yes, they can just prescribe Tamiflu without any medical qualifications whatsoever. And it's probably just a normal flu you have. And
we've seen that there's side effects to Tamiflu, aren't there? I mean,
nightmares, depression, nausea. No. The same things you'd get with flu, actually, except with flu, it's natural and you'd get over it, so...
And they're saying that the only advantage of Tamiflu is that you maybe have one day less symptoms, but you have the same severity of symptoms. So why would you want to take the drug? Especially with all the side effects, with children vomiting violently.
I think they're coming to the end of their shelf life. They need to push them off quickly to make a profit from them. That's what we've heard.
That's rather cynical, isn't it, if that's the case? OK, lots of questions, but mostly about stuff we've already actually talked about. There's somebody mentioned Dr. Mary's Monkey. There's a book, isn't there, which deals with some of these issues. I don't know if you're familiar with that. You familiar with that, Jane?
No.
OK, well, sorry, Pat, we're not going to talk about that. Some of the people involved in owning shares in these companies are quite interesting. Do you want to talk about that at all, Jane?
Yes, I'm not that familiar with the sort of background of the whole shareholder structure, but I understand, for example, that President Obama has substantial shares in biotech companies that were involved in, the bird flu, at least. The major institutional investor in Baxter is, I think it's called Global Equities or whatever, and a Rockefeller sits on that board, and the Rockefellers also fund the World Health Organization, and interestingly enough, John Rockefeller was also sitting on a key Senate committee in 2003, which passed the Senate Bill 666 on funding biological and chemical weapons, and this channeled state or government tax money into private companies like Baxter and Novartis to fund the development of biological weapons in the form of vaccines. So if you look a little bit behind the scenes, the same sort of people seem to be involved in financing WHO, Baxter, in the political decision-making process.
So, I mean, the more you look, it seems, the more horror is revealed, isn't it?
It is, and the question is, why has the media not covered these sort of bills? Why weren't they the front page of, say, the New York Times in 2003? At least one day they could have had a report about the Senate bill and asked about its implications of using tax money to fund this. Why was nobody told about, WHO taking over the USA basically in the event of a pandemic emergency? Why is this also new to us? That's the big question to my mind.
It's amazing, isn't it? People have all their rights taken away and no one says a word.
And the media doesn't comment on it. And unfortunately, the media is controlled by the same corporate interests that control Baxter and the banks and so on, and that are financing WHO. And it appears that they're using the media systematically to deflect attention from these essential areas and keep people entertained with irrelevant, kind of news stories or whatever, and not telling them this essential information. As somebody who worked in the media, I can only 100% confirm the existence of a well-thought-through, systematic filter.
OK, I've got a text here that I think we perhaps need to explain something. I don't know who this is from. It says, will health workers be forced to take Tamiflu? I think it's important to make a distinction between Tamiflu, which is an antiviral pill, and a vaccine, which is supposed to set up your immune system. So, I mean, is Tamiflu necessarily very dangerous? Is it part of this? If we were looking at a conspiracy where they're going to give people 3 shots of a vaccine, which will eventually kill them, is that the same set of circumstances? Does that involve Tamiflu, Jane?
Well, I'm not an expert, but Dr. Rebecca Carley, who is really a renowned expert in these things, she explained that Tamiflu basically suppresses the symptoms and it allows viruses to mutate. So if you wanted to inject people and maybe use them as sort of test tubes to get a more lethal virus once you've injected all this stuff into their blood, and you want to accelerate the mutation of that virus and the likelihood of it becoming really lethal, then Tamiflu is what you'd use, she explained. So it could well be a part of the whole kind of ingredient. Also, the shelf life of the Tamiflu that's going to be issued has expired.
Yeah, Amanda said that, yes.
Yes, it gave an emergency declaration which said that it could be used for 2 more years because of this so-called pandemic emergency. So people will be getting Tamiflu that is actually expired and it's never been tested. They have no idea what's going to happen.
OK, well, I've got a text here from somebody called Gordy in Newcastle, and I think it's a he. He says, I consider myself awake and know all vaccines are evil, but tried to tell my parents and got shot down. They apparently said, how can I possibly know more than the doctors? So, Paul, what do you think? How do you persuade people that you know more than the doctors?
That's the big problem. It's very difficult because the doctors have the weight of authority behind them. I mean, I used to trust the doctors. I'm not saying anything against doctors, but what it appears to be is between the World Health Organization and people like the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, and the equivalent in all the other countries,
it's nice in the UK, isn't it? It's,
I'm not sure what it is.
National Institutes of Clinical Excellence.
There's one. There's probably a European one.
I know what it is in Ireland.
There'll be a body. It's probably European. I'm not too sure myself, but in each country, you can be sure that there's some body who is responsible for sanctioning the drugs, and they recommend them. The doctors say, "Oh, this drug has been, trialed in such and such a clinical trial, and it's safe, and we recommend it." Studies have shown, experts have said, and people, people are good people like ourselves. We instinctively trust official-sounding organisations who are supposed to be there for humane reasons and supposed to be benign, but the evidence is stacked up against that. So, I mean, to answer your original question, it's very hard to get people to think that the doctors can't be trusted. And it's not the doctors themselves. I mean, we want to approach doctors as well and go, look, although you won't accept this, you need to have a look at this and be sure that you're not being used unintentionally, without your knowledge for a very dangerous scheme. But, I mean, I agree with what Gordy there is saying. It's nearly an impossible task. You just have to keep putting out the information.
OK, here's a text from Kay in Wales, and this is a really interesting problem. Maybe you can answer this, Amanda. She says, I'm against vaccine, but my ex wants our 2 special needs kids, 19 and 17, to have it. Where do I stand legally? Where would she stand legally?
I don't know where she'd stand legally with that. I mean, at the moment, that's all people are saying. We do. Some want it and some don't. I mean, that's between her and her partner. I honestly don't know where it would stand. Well, ex-partner. I honestly don't know where they would stand legally. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think in the UK it's not compulsory. I mean,
well, not yet. Of course it isn't.
Not yet.
But,
no.
If they declare that it is compulsory, then.
But the situation that I see occurring is that if somebody's virus or vaccines tainted with bird flu do get out, or if they manage to recombine it anyway and just release it, they'll portray that in the media as the new, more lethal strain of swine flu and go, well, you have to get your vaccine quick before it mutates again. And people go, oh, no, I better go down and get my vaccine quick. And they'll be getting the dangerous vaccines then. So at which point, if a more lethal strain, if the bird flu strain, say, arrives and they call it the more lethal strain of swine flu, which they've been telling us is going to happen for a year in the media, so they're putting the seed out, conditioning us to go, well, we knew it was coming, then they could make it compulsory and go, oh, this is a huge emergency, a big national threat, everyone has to get vaccinated, and it'll happen quickly. So that's the danger, one of the dangers I see coming. OK, Tony in Wirral says, isn't this all similar to what Dr. Len Horowitz warned us about earlier this year? He was a guest on this show, actually, and yes, it is a similar subject, but I mean, Jane has kind of catalysed this. I mean, I think perhaps we should get onto that, Jane. You've catalysed this by taking legal action. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, I mean, I was, as I said, I was here in Austria and I saw no way of really publicising it, and I saw there was no investigation taking place. So I myself drew up criminal charges and 70 pages of evidence, and I handed them in at the